And Arnel, are you ready?
Good.
Take it away.
Hey, thank you. Before I hit the next slide and go to the agenda, I just want to quickly say, big thanks to Sebastian Bay and to you, Lexi and Goose, for everything you guys do. Admire what you guys do here with your platform. I've learned a lot from your past webinars, so really appreciate this opportunity for us to share in the community. So a little bit about myself. I'm an Army strategist in the U.S. Army, working in NATO over here in the United Kingdom, and I'll talk about the Fight Club that I helped start. And Dr. Tom Nagle's with me. Thanks for being along. Tom, do you want to do a quick intro?
Sure. Thanks again to everybody participating. I've been a long time watcher of this program, so I'm happy to be participating at this point. So I'm Tom Nagle. I'm a retired Army officer. Since I've left the Army, I've been working on several different entrepreneurial ventures. This is one that happened to hit at the right time, and at the time that I met Arnel, who's a fellow Army strategist. I was a strategist as well. That needed something, and what we're presenting here kind of grew out of my initial thoughts on wargaming, and also what Arnel needed by the time we got linked up. And we're still working on this, and it's still evolving, and we're looking forward to the discussion. Thanks.
All right, everybody. So what we got here is the agenda, and what I won't do for you is read a lot of the stuff out from the slides, but the slides will help us out just as a guide to the discussion. Put a lot of effort into the slides, so after watching a lot of these, we have you as the audience in mind, so that hopefully by the end of this thing, you'll take away some ideas, and you'll have our contact information if you want to connect further. So I'll start off by talking about UK Fight Club, how we started, what we're about, the background context behind why we need to, war game below the threshold, or sub-thresholds, they call it here in the UK, below the level of large-scale armed conflict. And then talk about Operation Maelstrom, the game that we use the scenario that we use to prototype WarPaths, the mechanics, and some takeaways. And then I'll turn over to Tom, who will talk Matrix games, asynchronous gaming, and then do a quick demo of WarPaths. So here we go. So what is Fight Club? Again, I'm not going to read the slides, but we are an informal, outside of the bureaucracy, organization and community practice, that a grassroots initiative where we're taking different types of wargaming methods, tools, and software to test out our concepts, our thinking about how we should fight across the full spectrum of conflicts. So there's digital games, there's manual games we're trying out. I'll show some of that, but that's who we are. Why are we doing this? We want to. It's mainly the human edge we want to have across our community, within the military and government, to create better thinkers, adaptive thinkers, and we think that the games can help us do that. And then finally, we want to, number 2 down there, we're going to talk about WarPaths as one of the examples, but we want to rapidly, develop and test and prototype different tools, and then transition them into our soldiers and service members' hands, so that we and within the government to use. Our mantra on the right there, think, fight, learn, repeat, kind of guides a lot of our activity and is the spirit behind what we're about. You can check out our website at the bottom down there, and I'll have it at the end. And we have, our own rules, because you always hear that. We always see on social media, the first rule of Fight Club, and don't talk about it, but we've created our own rules, so check it out. So who's in Fight Club? I'll just start from the left. There's a bit of a busy slide. 850 plus members from 16 different countries, and we have our US Fight Club starting up on the other side of the Atlantic from where I'm at, and if Fight Club Italia is starting up over here, and Fight Club Netherlands, they're growing their communities, and we're all kind of connected up in a loose way, but helping each other out to grow. And you also see above that, what are we about? As I said before, just trying to, everybody that joins at the baseline level membership, they're just trying to be better at their profession. So they're gaming to maximize individual and team performance through whether it's human, procedural, technical means. We hope that they get some out of the club. There's cognitive diversity embraced. We embrace the Derby House principles, as you see from that image there, the colorful image. And then, one thing we are is we're flat. So we're a lot, there's no rank in Fight Club. We're a bit of a meritocracy. So in the middle there, what you see, what we have governing the governance of Fight Club is what we call a warrior council. So those that are, committing to helping manage the group are driving a lot of the core activity. So just quick around the network, we have people from as young as 15 from universities and from the cadet organizations in the UK joining and playing games. We have think tanks in academia, well connected there. We've done a bunch of, we presented a bunch of conferences, and then going to the right with industry, to include even the movie industry. We did a collaboration with a Hollywood firm where we took some technology and techniques from Fort Bragg, from the special operations community, and combined it with Hollywood and the film industry to create this new virtual reality platform. If there's interest in that, I got a video in the backup to show anybody if there's time. And then senior leaders and a lot of senior leader champions for Fight Club. And then on the far right there, you see OGDs, which is our equivalent to interagency in the US, but over here in the UK, they call them other government departments and multinational partners. We have people all the way of different ministries joining Fight Club in Whitehall, and even the police. And then finally, the point to make is, like, just as we're going to talk about WarPaths, we really believe that by connecting our soldiers and service members and warfighters with the S&T community, that we have this dialogue in the club, that can spark a lot of different innovations. And we've seen that with the number of we've done that a few times, and we'll talk about that. So it's a bit of a busy slide, so I'll take to unpack here. Grab a little highlighter. So starting at the top, there's a quote there from Nobel Prize winner Elinor Ostrom from an article that's referenced. I'll share the reference later, but 2 enduring lessons from Elinor Ostrom. And another, what she's saying there is we should take a mixed method approach to study complex problems, and that's after years of scholarship on studying game theory. And I think she has a very great point there, illustrated by that quote. And so what we're trying to do in Fight Club, and particularly where I sit right now within NATO, as you can see from this diagram, depending on the context, what you see here at the bottom, Next War Poland by GMT series, it can be the foundational wrap for your whatever problem you're trying to solve. Could be a manual game like Next War Poland, or the wargaming system, the OWS being created by the U.S. Marine Corps and Tim Barrick. If you haven't seen that video, I encourage you to do so. It's a lot of good stuff that the Marines are doing with their wargaming stuff. But that can be the foundational wrap at the bottom here. And then if you look to the left of this, we might call left of bang, prior to conflict, is how do you, we tend to, especially in the military, we go straight to wargaming or exercising this stuff, all the fighty stuff. And then we kind of like wish away, or we don't get too involved in this left of bang, and we need to. So that was kind of the requirement to, set the stage for the fight. So what were the conditions? And we wanted to use the simulation of war game to get to that state, to that condition. So as you see there, Tom's going to talk more of this later, but WarPaths and matrix games can can simulate or go through what irregular warfare, special warfare, peace building, a wide range of activity. And so we have game tools to do that. Then you see here, with combat mission, if you want to zoom in with the higher degree of fidelity, how would you fight perhaps an urban fight? We have combat mission that we've been testing and playing with. And as you can see from the little mini video there, what that might look like, and go from platoon to maybe company level, but not much more bigger than that for those that are familiar with combat mission. And then going to the right here with the, maybe you want to simulate, you see this problem of opposed, fighting through a wet gap crossing, something we see at the core level a lot. And maybe you can use Flashpoint campaigns and use that simulation to war game out what that might look like. And then pushing to the right, these last two things, we should take into consideration the doctrinal videos. You'll see this little snippet of video here from the Operational Environment Center at TRADOC, and the British Army has the Army Knowledge Exchange where they have videos. But I mean, there's some unmined resources there that we should probably make better use of, where they have put a lot of time and effort into developing these videos about how you might fight, for instance, combined arms breach, FPOL, friendly passage of lines, all kinds of things. So to help your learning about how you might do your job better. And then finally, if you want to simulate the deep fight or more joint fighting with Command Professional Edition, joint fires, a deep attack with, attack aviation, or even the defeat of IADS, integrated air defense system. This is our wargaming nirvana. I mean, how can we, this is our head mark. How can you take all these different simulations and tools, have that data and information outputs pour into a data lake that can be interrogated further with AI and machine learning applications. This is what we're trying to achieve over the next coming years. And that leads me to the first concept capability demonstrator that we started with DSTL. So on the left here, you'll see the technology, and then, over here going to the preparation and the event. But this first concept capability demonstrator that we did, we call a CCD, with the Defense Science and Technology Laboratory in the UK, DSTL, with the sponsor being the head of Future Force Development. We took these 3 tools, starting with combat mission at the lower tactical level. We ran a campaign of learning where it took roughly around 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the fighter, how long it took for them to go through the missions in this campaign of learning that we created. And then another one, Operation Crimson Dawn, a one-on-one fight that some of our players conducted. Moving up to Flashpoint campaigns, another campaign learning called Waning Sun. And then it culminated to where Thunderclap encapsulated all this activity, where Thunderclap did some really serious testing of these simulations in a classified setting at DSTL, and some fighters were selected to go participate in that. And that leads us to the background context on WarPaths. It didn't work out the way we like. It just took a while for some of we actually worked really fast, and we delivered pretty quickly to develop this tool, but we couldn't get the financial mechanism of time to get WarPaths and the Operation Maelstrom to set the conditions for the beginning of the Thunderclap. But we went ahead and pressed on further, and we'll talk about it. So here on this operational Maelstrom summary, again, it's a busy slide. I won't read it to you. The task was for us to host and run a distributed matrix style wargaming, and I'll just quickly snapshot down to the bottom. We had I3 Gen led by Paul Ellis and Jake Alexander, who developed the game scenario and helped facilitate the game, serving as the white cell with Fight Club. And then we were graded and evaluated by Dr. Steve Colson of NSC, and also a scholar at the Oxford Changing Character War Center. So Maelstrom, 6 weeks. We wanted to think, about how we can, as the title says, exercise all levers of government below the threshold of large scale armed conflict, or gray zone, or liminal warfare, whatever you might want to call it. We had 60 participants. We initially just wanted to get 12 to 24, but because of the high interest, we just went ahead and, because we want to stay inclusive in Fight Club, we went ahead and just made the room and built out a bigger game to create 6 teams. And those 6 teams are spread over 6 time zones as we ran this game over 6 weeks. And you can see from the bottom paragraph there, it was a strongly positive reception from the players, from the observers. 80% of respondents say this is better than some of the other matrix games they had played with. And then 74% said that they would want the organizations to use something like this to test out their ideas and to simulate whatever it is whatever problem they're trying to get after, because it does inspire people to be creative with their thinking, to exercise your imagination, and Tom will get into some of that. Here's the mechanics of the game. So we had 6 teams, as I said before. We had a UK government team, a NATO regular team, a NATO soft team, and then a USA government team. So there were 4 blue teams, and then 2 red teams, a red government and a red soft. And there's a bit of noise about, well, why is this a little bit lopsided? But, given the scenario that we were looking at, it does reflect a bit of reality in terms of size and scale of the alliance against the adversary. So we were kind of cool with it. And in the end, even the red team really, they gave them a run for their money. So it was a very, tightly competitive game. And so it wasn't too off balance. So going into the game flow down here, this is what a week looked like. The teams would work together to talk about their moves. They would submit 3 moves and a secret move by Tuesday. And this was all coordinated over whether they wanted to use Zoom. A lot of it was done on Slack. We use Slack as our main platform for communication with different channels, and whatever they want to use. So we didn't really dictate to the teams how they need to collaborate or cooperate. And it was a part of us watching how they would behave. And so there was a lot of realism with how they operated, because there was even friction, just kind of even within the alliance. And I sit within NATO right now and understand some of this. It's not that easy to kind of all get along and agree on everything. So it does take a lot of work to facilitate cooperation across teams. And we saw that happening. And that was a good exercise of what does it really look like. And so they would submit their turns, and then there'd be a period of a day or so for them to do counter arguments on the other teams, their adversarial teams' actions, and then to reply again the next day with counter responses. And then we had a white cell adjudication. And so the white cell, what that looks like is they would meet at the end of the week. We would take 4 to 6 of us, an SME panel. So we had Dr. Rob Johnson from the Change of Character War Center participate and help us out a lot at Oxford. And we had observers like Dr. Davy Banks from King's College London's, the wargaming director or wargaming academic director over there, observe, and some other academics get involved. And what we did was we didn't want to just roll dice and adjudicate in that fashion. So I think this was really helpful. After adjudicating, we would look at after looking at all the different arguments and determining what we were going to do. I mean, and many times we let the game go. We were very surprised at some of the turns or directions that the teams went, and we just went with it. Our initial instinct was to clamp down and punish or push in a way back to the scenario that we would want to play out. But then because it's a matrix game, a little more looser structure, we went ahead and most times we just let it go. And so we let it play out the way we, wherever they thought they might go to see what anomalies we had with our thinking, which I think was really good. And after adjudicating, one way of us showing our summary was to share out social media or even just news media images just stating what the outcome might be. And the cool thing about that, there was a degree of ambiguity about, well, was that good for us or was that good for them? And we watched the teams interpret the summary of the news feeds, and that was kind of helpful. And we got good feedback off of that and how they saw their actions. So they just didn't see not successful or successful as the outcome of their turn. We try to be a little more creative with how we responded as white cell. And then the players would, look at what happened over the weekend and then reset for the following week. And we did that for 6 weeks. So I'll go into the key takeaways from the stuff we learned from this game. So this is from top two things are from Dr. Steve Colson, who was evaluating us. 2 distinct advantages over traditional matrix games. One is the game length. Because we operated distributed and remotely from where we were at with this matrix game, it allowed, over a longer period of time, it allowed us to study and observe these outcomes over time, over a longer period of time. And that was helpful. Sometimes when you get together and you have a 1 to 2 day event, you might not have the chance to do that. So that was one takeaway that we aim to sustain, but 6 weeks might've been long. So we're trying to find that sweet spot, maybe 3 to 5, maybe 6 weeks if we have the time. But another insight it's not mentioned there is some of the players have mentioned doing a turn 0 so that they can kind of figure out their battle rhythm so that they're not in a frenzy right from the get-go, from the start. And I think that was a good idea. So something that we probably want to take away as a group and organization. Number 2 there, diversity of participants. I mean, we had all ages, all backgrounds, very diverse group of players. And I'm really grateful for that because that's what we wanted. And so we had, male and female from, special advisors at the Ministry of Defense, at the Cabinet Office, sometimes what they call fast streamers playing along. And we had academics, we had students, we had military and all different types of commands. And then we had people from Whitehall. We had some ministers get involved, take a brief on some of the outputs of the game. And I think that, that level of diversity contributed to our ability to have, to think more differently about the problems we were trying to solve. And I think that's important. And I think Tom's going to hit on this a lot more later. And finally, it was just a great way to learn, and I can't say better than this captain from the British Army, Captain Ali Yellett below. So I'm just going to quit this. Hopefully this works. I'll just click this quick video. You can hear him talk about his observation from the game.
Say that this is some of the most efficient and effective professional development I've ever done. I think if you asked any officer in the army, do they think they should know more about NATO? The answer would be yeah. And if you ask them, what should you do? They say, I'll do some reading. When are you going to get around to it? Probably never. By signing up to this, doing this war game, I had to do about 30 minutes to an hour's reading every week about what NATO can actually do, and then got to have an hour-long Zoom call with people from across NATO who know far more about it than I do. And so as far as learning about NATO and its capabilities, this was such an efficient way for me to just improve as an officer. So thank you, and it was great.
So that That's me for the Fight Club and the Operation Maelstrom. I'm gonna now turn it over to Tom to talk about WarPaths.
Say that
Oh,
this is
sorry.
one of the most
There we go. Over to you, Tom.
All right, so there's a couple lines of thought in here. So what I wanted to do, and I saw the questions about matrix games, which I'll address. So there's a couple lines of thought that kind of converge at the point where this game was put out for use by the Fight Club. So I'm going to have to walk you through a couple of the lines of logic. We'll back up and then talk through the next one. And this is the first one, and this is something that I've been interested in a while. From my background as a strategist in the military. And that we're frequently, especially with the war game that we ran here, dealing with unfamiliar environments. And we're seeing this pop up a lot more, not only in the military, but it's in the political realm and the business realm, and that you're dealing with a lot of unfamiliar environments. So my background is in international relations. So one of the practices that we often do is try to disaggregate when you're facing a problem like this. The actors from the environment and the rule sets, and depending on what approach you take, you might see different combinations of that. So what I've done here is kind of break out some of the key characteristics as I saw when you're dealing with an unfamiliar game. And first is just the environment itself. And for me, it's a good way to think about the relationship between variables. You have some dependent variable that you're trying to influence, and you've got all these independent variables that you think you can control to create the outcome that you want. But in reality, in unfamiliar environments, you don't really know what the coefficients of any of these things are. They might be positive, they might be negative. A lot of the times, you take some action and you find out that the outcome is the exact opposite of what you had hoped to achieve. And I think we've seen that over the past couple of decades. In our engagement in the Middle East. So the first characteristic of these unfamiliar environments is that you're often dealing with an unknown environment. Second, you really don't know what the rules of the game are, of the real world game that you're playing. We're running into this a lot in political warfare that we had this game focus on. We're seeing this in the space realm. If somebody attacks a satellite or disperses a debris field in the orbit that might impact some of the satellites that are out there, what's the proper response? What's the rule? What are the rules of this game? Same thing with cyber attacks. So there's not a lot of clarity in these situations about what the accepted rules of the game are, and there's going to be this process of trying to figure out what those are, just like there was during the Cold War. And a lot of times we're also seeing these asymmetric opportunities where red's options are going to be a lot different from blue's in the game. Red might be fine with spreading disinformation through a lot of different media channels, whereas blue will not do that and will make a particular effort to make sure that accurate information is being put out. But the reality is there's so much information out there, it's very difficult to tell what's true and what's biased in favor of whoever is spreading it. So we're often facing this information overload problem in these unfamiliar environments where you have multiple sources of information, probably none of them are in agreement. And there's this challenge of trying to figure out what type of information are you going to base your actions on? Next slide. So I've got a quick clarifying point down here. I saw the question about matrix games. If you're not familiar, the best way to think about them might be a structured argument that operates on a point counterpoint example, which Arnel kind of hinted at. Any move in the game is submitted in the form of an argument where you take an action and you clarify what you expect the result to be. So this is kind of that independent and dependent variable relationship that I was just talking about in the previous slide. You take an action, you expect a result, and then you can identify a couple of reasons why you believe that that action is going to succeed, or reasons that you believe that you're going to create the result that you want to achieve. And then so these matrix games will play out by somebody making an argument, and then all the other teams having an opportunity to listen to that argument and provide counterpoints. And then you might have another round of, the counterpoint, another counterpoint, and then it's up to the white cell to determine, what actions they think are most reasonable and appropriate and what the outcomes are going to be. So you can have very structured games where you're modeling a particular, maybe in a tactical situation where you understand the relationships between variables very well, but at the strategic level, these relationships are a little less well known. So matrix games are better at addressing these types of situations because it's really limited by the creativity of the participants as well as what the white cell deem appropriate. This is not intended to simulate landing of aliens in Washington, D.C., unless that's what your war game is focusing on. I've seen crazier things out there for games, but it's really intended to be a creative but realistic approach to the conflict that you're dealing with. So that's what makes war games, going back up to the top of this slide, kind of perfect for dealing with those poorly understood environments. Maximizes player creativity, and the process that I'm going to lay out over the next couple slides make an argument that it's best for supporting some organizational innovation by challenging some of the assumptions, which is the next point here. So with a matrix game, where you're incentivized rather to actually put out a countervailing argument against something that's been presented, this really gives the permission rather to disagree with some of the heavy hitters that might be involved in the war game. If you've been involved in a professional war game, the argument is often carried by those with the highest rank and who speak early and often. And that's kind of the way that the war game will play out. But with a matrix game where everybody is expected rather to provide an argument that undermines that initial assertion, it provides a better environment for challenging assumptions and biases that might be involved in that frame. And it turns out that this is a good way to address some of the noise and the signal versus the noise problem that I'm sure you've heard about, and trying to figure out what are the key factors that should be involved in a problem set as you try to address whatever your challenge is. Next slide. So now this is kind of one of those things where I'm going to back up again and talk about a different path of logic that led me to develop WarPaths. And by the time I got linked up with Arnel, some of the thought behind the development and something that I hope is reflected in the design of the game. And so when you're faced with a lot of these situations where it's not clear what how the environment is structured or what you're dealing with, a lot of the times the people that are responsible for making decisions follow a similar structure of decision making, and that there's typically a key decision maker advised by a panel of experts. And you'll see this structure, whether it's a president being advised by his national security staff, a combatant commander being addressed by the people that are in charge of personnel, plans, strategy, intelligence. You'll see it with CEOs who have sales, marketing, operations that are advising him on a particular problem set that he or she is dealing with, and they have to make a decision. But in this model, you'll have a central decision maker, but all of those advisors, it's best to go in with the assumption that they're all going to be biased in some way. Some of it's personal experience, a lot of it will be bureaucratic experience, and that famous phrase that where you stand depends on where you sit. So wherever you are in the bureaucratic structure, that will often bias your recommendations. And just to simplify, in order to understand, what is a good working definition of bias, the best way to understand it is whatever course of action you're recommending to a key decision maker, you'll tend to overestimate the benefits of a preferred course of action while underestimating the costs. And these are just the blinders that we all carry around with us that we are not often aware of. What's good for the State Department is good for America if that's where you come from. And this is kind of the perspective that you bring into these key decision meetings. So with this structure, there's multiple challenges that a key decision maker is going to be facing. First is the framing effects, and I kind of alluded to this, and that the person with the most rank that speaks early and speaks often is able to determine what's the structure of the challenge. What are the key issues that have to be debated? And just by that simple framing effect, you may discount a lot of options and not consider things that you should, and it will turn out that you definitely should have addressed as things actually play out in the real world. And there's also this 51% problem. So let's say, just to explain this, let's say that you're working for the State Department, and based on the challenge that you're facing with, you can only reasonably come up with one recommendation to bring forward to the president. You know that there are challenges or problems associated with this recommendation that you're going to make, but you don't want to be too vocal about that, because unless you go into that meeting with the perspective that you believe in this option 100%, you are going to be rolled by the people that are forcefully advocating for their actions. So if you only believe in a problem or a solution 51%, and you know that there's this 49%, in that there are potential big downsides for this, unless you go in there and argue as if you believe in it 100%, you're going to get rolled by the other bureaucratic actors that are forcefully arguing your point. So this creates a huge problem for a key decision maker in trying to figure out how they determine the truth. Because if the one way to do this might be if that key decision maker becomes an expert in each of the areas that he's responsible for, but that kind of takes away the power of having an advisor. And if we could bring up the next couple points there in the build. Turns out that there's a couple of practices that a key decision maker can use to figure out what is the truth in this situation. First, all these options that are being brought by the bureaucracies have to be considered publicly. And then the best way to think of this is a diversity of biases that are brought into the problem, and that everybody has this public debate where they know that anybody that's bringing in a recommendation into this decision forum, that there's going to be public critique of their options. So it starts to shift the incentives. You start to cover your own bases in terms of maybe not ignoring some of the downsides of your argument, so that you can develop a counterpoint to anybody that might be publicly criticizing your recommendation to the key decision maker. And then it turns out, finally, if you go back and you revisit these key decisions a couple times, more information is brought into the process. Everybody that's having a public debate benefits from hearing that public debate play out. They learn new information, and they go back and they can modify their recommendations based on what they've heard and the research that they've done. So it turns out that all three of these things, they start to look an awful lot like an asynchronous matrix war game. And a lot of the thought process behind this is some of the work that I did when I was actually at Georgetown working on my PhD. I'm a graduate of the SSP program myself. Did the joint program with the government department, and this was some of the work that I did in support of that. So this is where I arrived with that executive decision model. And I'll give you the opportunity to ask some questions here in a few minutes when we wrap up the slide portion of this. Next slide, please. All right, so related to this is why we believe that an asynchronous game approaches might be the best for all of these conditions that I've talked about. Unfamiliar environments, lots of biases that a key decision maker is dealing with. And this model is borrowed from the journal article mentioned below at the bottom of the slide. So if you just think conceptually, obviously this is a kind of a high level concept and not reality, in that we can think of bias below when we're working with two different frames. Frame A is obviously biased in one direction, and an option that is based on that frame and whatever set of bureaucratic incentives and personal biases that person that's making this recommendation is operating off of, they will tend to be highly biased if there's only one single recommendation that's brought into that key decision maker, when he knows that there's not going to be any critique of that argument. And I think if you look back at the history of the Department of Defense, you can identify a couple of different situations where there were people that controlled the frame and controlled the argument and carried the day. But if we go through this over a couple of iterations, if we bring in a second frame into that process where whoever is making this recommendation on option 2 has an opportunity to break away, think through the option that was presented in front of the key decision maker, develop countervailing points, and wrap his or her head around whatever the challenge was, he or she can come back into this meeting with a better understanding of what they might be facing in another recommendation, and how they can improve their own recommendations being brought. And if you go through this just a couple of more iterations, you can get the idea that as we continue to revisit these frames and these options, ideally we get closer and closer to reality. Next slide, next build, yeah. So some of the key takeaways for this, and if you refer back to the decision or the point that was made by the British captain, he talked about coming into whatever turn he was playing in the Matrix war game, breaking away, doing some research, and bringing in new information to have when that next turn was being put together. So breaking away and having repeated debates on the best alternative in a public forum where somebody's argument is presented and critiqued, and it forces the revelation of private information. If you're familiar with international relations, one of the logical or rational explanations for war is that the actors have private information and incentives to misrepresent. Well, this plays out in bureaucracies because of what I just laid out as well. And this argumentation process helps incentivize the revelation of private information. And everybody starts to anticipate their weaknesses in their arguments and moderate their estimates of benefits and costs for each of their recommendations. And ideally, a better recommendation is generated by this. Next slide, please. That's a good point that was just brought up on a legal trial. So some of the legal theory actually helped inform some of my thinking. So that's actually a very good source for trying to understand, the theory behind why matrix arguments works is the legal profession, actually. So thank you for bringing that point up, whoever just posted that. So these are some of the key takeaways from my perspective on matrix gaming that based on some of these strands of logic that I just explored. Make sure that when you are conducting a matrix game that you're preserving these disagreements and making sure that they're brought into the final argumentation process where everybody's bringing in their own perspective on what's best, but make sure that those are preserved until the end. And unfortunately, if you look at some of the bureaucratic processes that are out there, I'm primarily from the Department of Defense, and we go through this process where we are very deliberate in eliminating disagreements before we bring something to our senior leaders, and we make sure that everybody is in agreement and that there's only one recommendation that's brought forth to the senior decision maker. That's a very poor way of going about business, and there's sure to be bias that survives into the final stages, and that key decision maker has to deal with it. I already talked, I think, extensively about the importance of debating publicly, which Matrix Wargaming gives you the opportunity to do, and insisting upon objections and preventing a single frame being brought into the problem set. And finally, I think it's important, or not second to the last, I think it's important to revisit and rework these scenarios, because no single war game is going to give you the right answer. But when you know that if you do a repeated set of war games and you start to take away key insights on what your sources of risk are or opportunities that you hadn't considered, this is where these types of war games are very useful in figuring out where to look for creative approaches when you're in a real world situation, rather than just validating a single recommendation that unfortunately we tend to take with war games, or that, we want to see whether or not this one particular concept works, yes or no, and that doesn't give the opportunity to explore alternative paths. And finally, because of some of the stuff that I've laid out, and make an argument that it's important to build in time for this to mitigate that framing effect. Me personally, I'm someone that likes to take in everybody's argument and think about it, and I may not be ready to present my best argument in a 3-hour war game, but if I do it in a part-time situation where I'm doing it 1 hour one day and then I come in the next day, I will have the opportunity to better think through my logic, maybe look for some supporting points, and make sure that my logic is sound and it's well researched. This mitigates what's called the availability bias, in that if you're conducting a 3-hour war game, you're basically stuck with the information that you brought into that game at the time that you walked into the door. There's no opportunity for you to go do some research and to think things through, to have that experience where you're running down, taking a jog, and you start to put things together in creative ways. I mean, you can do some synthesis and you're sitting in a 3-hour war game, but having that time to break away and think through that process is key for creativity and innovation. If you look at any of the business books that are out there, that this time to think through these problems and make unconventional connections between these different constellations of logic and ideas is really where the best ideas tend to come from. I think that wraps it up for that slide. And what I'll do is just give a quick introduction on the next slide here for what we're about to talk about when we get into the demo. As a quick overview, again, WarPaths is a browser-based platform intended to support matrix games. It's really a platform in that everybody is intended to be able to have the opportunity to design your scenario that you want to wargame. It operates on an email invite system. It can be used for synchronous or asynchronous play. It was primarily designed for Arnel's group's purposes, where it's primarily an asynchronous play scenario, but we've since added some other capabilities. And I think all the advantages that you see on the right there are some of the things that I've already talked about, with the addition of, you capture an entire game history and you have it in an easy to reference format. It also makes it a little bit more white cell friendly. When I introduced the idea of matrix war games a couple slides ago, just by there being a less rigid set of rules, it increases the responsibility on the white cell to manage the chaos as it unfolds in the game. And the platform was kind of designed with trying to make sure that the white cell had a user-friendly environment as much as possible available to them as they're trying to figure out, what's playing out in the minds of these players as they go through this process. So the next set of discussion is going to be a WarPaths demo, but we talked about having a pause here to see if there's any questions on the slides before we transition over to the next part. So I'll pass it over to Lexi. I don't know if you're seeing things you want to address.
Yeah, so everyone continue to add whatever questions you have in the slides. I would ask for our presenters, this is actually one of my questions, where do people go to get more information? And it looks like we have a lot of great articles and podcasts posted here. So we'll go ahead and work with you behind the scenes to make sure that information is available to our community members. So our first set of questions kind of revolves around the games or simulations that you have run. What have you had to change in your working model and your assumptions going forward and adapting to the pandemic environment?
I'll go first. So the way we design this and the method of distributed wargaming through a virtual means and this software tool, I mean, I think of the WarPaths as like a great dashboard for a matrix game that Tom built. This was all designed so that we can play through with the pandemic at hand. We couldn't get together. And so we know that going forward, we'll continue to have hybrid, a mix of live and virtual. And I think these tools still help us, because the cool thing about the WarPaths and the way with the Slack that we use for the communications is that all this data is captured and we have it all to go through and interrogate later to analyze. So we created those tools. I think that gets after the question. Tom, do you want to attack that?
Yeah, so actually the design of this platform actually started after the pandemic hit. Shortly after, I had been thinking about some of these things for a while, and it just happened to be putting this together at the time that things started to get locked down. And Arnel, once we started talking to each other, kind of laid out the challenges that he faced in terms of trying to run a matrix game with a combination of technologies that were not necessarily integrated. So I think, and I might be speaking out of turn here, I'll let Arnel jump in again, but I think one of the challenges was having that central frame of reference for the war game so that everybody had a common understanding instead of trying to bounce slides back and forth between each other. And, what version of the slides are you looking at? And that creates problems. And I've heard this from other people as well. So I think this was designed to help with that problem of trying to keep everybody on the same sheet of music at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that this wasn't our first as the club, as a fight club. This wasn't our first game that we participated in like this. We had a matrix game that we learned a lot from with Special Operations Command Europe. Dr. JP DeRosa ran it, and he allowed us to play the red teams and from Fight Club in the UK. And so we learned a lot from that game. And so I saw a question earlier, and maybe I'll address it now, is that you brought up there, Tom, the shared awareness. Someone asked, how do players have shared awareness from the game? Well, one was the dashboard with the WarPaths. You can see what the outputs of the turns were. And then you also had Slack, a communications tool. If you haven't heard of Slack, just think of it as like a WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger on steroids, because it has channels that can organize teams. Teams can create diplomatic channels. And that a lot of the information, I mean, in the beginning, it was so much that we're like, holy cow, we had to temper, Paul, the game director, had to put out a note to like temper the passion, because everyone there's so much energy. And we're like, hey, everyone's got to read this stuff, and it's hard to get away from it. You're on your phone going through volumes and volumes of a torrent of information. So we had to meter it a little bit more so that people weren't so fixed on looking at catching up on Slack with all the activity. But both those tools, I think, gave everyone pretty good awareness.
That's awesome. That sounds like a great way to utilize, readily available technology, but also institute rules for your game and for, we use Discord. So for your Slack server, your Discord server, that allow the game to be a part of people's lives as they are in disparate time zones. So question from me, what are some ways, going back to like slide 2 or 3, you had a bunch of different community members, from industry, different departments or ministries of defense. How do you leverage those, the expertise and experiences of these different communities in the UK Fight Club?
Lexi, sorry, I was muted. Is it the slide you're talking to, referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what's great about the community being so flat, the club being flat like this and diverse, is that we coalesce around the members' ideas. So if that from everyone talking together, it could be like, hey, who wants to do a game in this with this? Who wants to do for instance, I'll just use Major Ed Farron, who's a pretty good game designer, and I think he's on the call right now. There was a demand for like, how do you do space? How do you fight? What does that look like? And so him and a few others, members just got together and they put together a game, designed a game, Sweeping Satellites, and then they played it and they tested it using, Tabletop Simulator or Discord to communicate. I can't remember what they used, but or Zooms. And that's the kind of collaboration that occurs. And so we definitely want to elicit the talent from within the group across the enterprise. And I think we've been doing a good job of that because we are so flat and we don't have any, mandates from government. We're not answering to anybody that is telling us to do this or that. But we do get employed to get after some stuff. And if we want to do it, we'll do it. And so I think that's how we've been approaching it. If that helps answer that question, Lexi.
Yeah, definitely getting that there's a focus on collaboration. So at that, given you have all these different groups, the question came up about I want to say all the different, low and high tactical, and then the strategic simulations. Other than diversity of offices that participated, were there diversity in the roles that participated from those offices?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's great because we don't want to force it. The one thing I want to make sure to emphasize is that we don't want to force people to participate, because then it would make it fun and it'd be kind of lame to force people to do something. So we want to inspire action as a community, as a group. And I think that, with our some of our team are pretty good at social media and marketing and advertising, and it's drawn in such a diverse crowd. So we had, I don't know if I said it clearly, but we had like special advisors, what they call SPADs, who are younger members in civil service in the government in the UK, fast streamers, people that are in a different program, career track, and then even ministers are involved in the Fight Club that have joined, that are, whether they're participating and they just want to play, or we're getting them briefs, and a number of generals. I mean, we have several generals that are big champions of the cause and participate as well. So there you go. I mean, there's a whole lot of diversity. And as you saw, I mean, if you're not familiar with that icon on the left there, the colorful one, the Derby House principles. For those of you in the audience, I mean, look it up. I mean, that we embrace that idea of being very inclusive, because we do, not just because it's a politically correct thing to do, it's because from that inclusivity and from that combination of different talent and different types of personalities and skills, I mean, sparks all this creativity, and we're seeing that in abundance. And so I think we want to continue that, and we hope, I mean, we do lack in proportion male to female. We hope to get more female players or fighters. And so if you're out there, any females, we need more to join. We don't want to force it, but if you're out there, join the club.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that was a really good overview kind of Derby House principles. For anyone listening who would like more information on them, Paxton has a great article. I will post in the chat when we are done with this question period. We have one more question about the Fight Club specifically. That is from Dan Leaf. Is the focus of or intended audience of Fight Club mainly at that institutional level? So, you know, like command colleges, staff colleges, or are you focusing on getting this out to an operational level?
It's a bit of both. And I mean, even so in the UK, they'll have those spears, and I almost created the chart because there was a difference between how we look at wargaming in the US as the US Fight Club starts to stand up. And Jeff Hodges, who's helping get that going, has like your strategist community, your 57 modeling simulations community, and then your operations research ORSA community, and having a convergence of all those different communities working on games together and then playing together. And so he sees that helping the institution, you know, the institutional army and also the operational army, different organizations, as we play games and really just educate. The real edge that we want to have is the human. So at the end of the day, even though we're using digital tools and we're talking about AI, is to give us more time as humans to make better decisions, to make them faster, to make better informed decisions. And so in the UK, I think for Fight Club, we're same thing, you know, we're focused on our fighters, you know, helping them improve professionally by giving them different tools or to use to learn. I mean, the real thing that I'm quite proud of, and the team is quite proud of, is the one simulation with the combat mission. I mean, that it was only 5,000 pounds the first purchase, and that proliferated across the British Army in different regiments where they were creating fight nights. And because they couldn't train because of the COVID and the pandemic, they were able to host within their officer and enlisted mess fight night sessions where they brought together using combat mission and simulated, you know, fighting each other and going at it, making it competitive, having fun. And that was all started from us creating, you know, the different campaigns of learning and really just giving them the tools to play with. And so I think that we're impacting at all levels in a way. So, and we're not too, even though we have numbers on there, to be honest, like we're not too worried about critical mass. I mean, the more people get, we're not too, you know, we have professional wargamers and hobby wargamers to people that are almost like myself. I'm just kind of still new at understanding and learning wargaming, to, you know, people that are brand new. And so the more people that we bring in collectively together, I think we're all going to start to change organizational culture within the government and defense to appreciate gaming more.
Great. So one additional question about wargaming, and then either Tom or Arnel, feel free to tackle this one about that strategic level wargaming, because we've talked about the low tactical and the high tactical games that have been run. At that level of wargaming, do you look to explore different strategic goals between allies, alliances, and or partnerships, and then how that affects the strategic maneuvers?
Yeah, absolutely. But go ahead, Tom. I mean, maybe you've done a number of games at that level if you want to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer from, you know, the perspective of what the platform is attempting to give people the opportunity to do, and that, you know, they are free to define what the characteristics of the game are will be that they're playing. Arnel might be the better person to address, you know, from the Fight Club perspective, what they're looking for on that. But, you know, from my side, the intent is to provide something that's flexible enough to allow people to determine what their goals are that they are going to be wargaming.
Yeah, I think just to highlight the point that you're asking about is the output of, as we were getting near the end of Operational Maelstrom, using WarPaths in this game, Paul and the teams, they did an outbrief to the policy advisor for the Ministry of Defense, the Secretary of State for Defense, over our SecDef equivalent, and they outbriefed him on some of the turn moves, and even he said, "Wow, this is it's really impacted and influenced his thinking about, as they're sitting there looking at the integrated review and what they were doing. It was really informative for him to hear the players and the teams inform him at that level. To me, that is for the UK, that's the pinnacle of the strategic level. There is that we're briefing and doing games that are and briefing them to leaders at that level. Doesn't get much higher for us here. I mean, from above that, I think it's the Prime Minister. So like I think so we are and those some of the people that were briefing were, I mean, really young. I mean, we had people that were students and also fast streamers that were just the beginning of their career, briefing such a senior leader on what we were doing. And we briefed 4 stars several times over in the Fight Club. So I think that the group is, as an informal network and community of practice, and we've been able to, because of who we are, being different. I think our perspective and our what we're doing, because it is our own time and we're doing this on our own. There's been an appreciation for what we bring to the table, and it shouldn't be threatening to those that are in defense or in government that are doing something similar, where they're doing wargaming. I think there's plenty of room for us to try to attack these complex problems that we're facing. So with that, over to you, Lexi, and probably do this demo.
I'm going to ask Sebastian's question, and then I think that'll be a good leeway into our demo if, Tom, you want to start getting it set up. What are your hopes? And he says ambitions, but I would also say goals, right? For the UK Fight Club in the future.
I think I'm going back to the slide, if you could see it with our little ninja videos in here. I think it's this. I think that right now we don't have this, where even just where I sit right now in NATO at a core level, is that if you're playing a game, not just a game to war game, courses of action, which most people in the military think about, but if we're gaming more broadly, and we have tools and options to go explore these games further, these games, I think our ambition is that all these digital systems and platforms, or even the manual ones, the output of those games start to build up, start to pour into this data lake that we can start to get after with AI applications to inform how we might, in the future. There's a great article that we wrote for Mad Scientist blog. Lieutenant Colonel Maddie Novak, from Fight Club, gets better, gets promoted, and we tell a story about what the future looks like with gaming. So I encourage everyone, it's in the final slide there, to check that out, because I think that really spells out where we think we should go with wargaming more broadly. But we want to have these different tools and games at our disposal, and this means, this is a big cultural change within the government, right? Because we'll have to have wargaming positions, because right now, if you're going to use these tools, you have to have people trained on them. You're going to have people that's their job, is to execute and to put together these scenarios, because it takes time, as we found, by playing around with these tools and games. And so I think this is a part of it, is to have that change where you can look at a problem with much more fidelity. Because what I see right now is some of the wargaming we do, and I think we all admit this at the core, is that's really simple box set, a bunch of guys and girls sitting on a table, and people are just kind of throwing out their opinions, and there's not much science behind it. And so we want to introduce more science, physics with the different games, because they're really, there's a high degree of physics and accuracy with games like Command PE, that we can start to integrate and inform our decision making, inform how we test out our ideas and concepts. This is the ambition. I think that we're on the way there in that first concept capability demonstrator, and another one that we're going to get ready to get funded for will help us take another bound further in that direction. Thanks for that question, Seb.
Awesome. So with that, I will kick it back to you guys. If you posted your question and it did not get asked, don't worry. We'll have another question period at the end, and I have everything recorded. And Tom, take it away with your demo.
Okay, I think you should hear me now. Thumbs up. Okay. All right, so what I'll do right now is just give a quick, 15-minute overview of the tool that was developed in conjunction with the Fight Club, and this is WarPaths. So if you want to look, take a look at it, what you can see on the front side, at least, you'll find it at warpaths.io, and it's a browser-based application and allows you to conduct the Matrix war games on smartphones to a certain extent, as well as laptops. So once you log in, this is the main screen that you're taken to. This is an interactive map, and you can set a default view. So if you're going to be conducting a Matrix war game, focused in on a city, you can do that, or stay, zoomed out for a more strategic game. So this map is interactive and controllable by the white cell as it's set up. There's a series of timers you can see right now, and the demo data that I'm using. We're in turn 2. You've got a little over 1 day left to enter in your argument for the matrix aspect, which I'll show in a second. And we're in a game ID called WarPaths demo. So on this main map, there's 2 categories of information that are shown. First is a series of colors that identify conditions on the map that are identified by the white cell. There's a reference sheet here, and this is all filled out by the white cell. So if you, for instance, right now, this is just information receptivity. There's 3 categories, as well as a no condition option. And each of these are weak, moderate, or strong. There's a different set of colors associated with each condition. And there's also some sub-state level information if you're playing something like a internal stability issue where you want to use colors to reference stability or political leanings, you can do that. The other category of information is our icons, and there are icons on here for units with information pop-ups as well as any incidents that you want to flash up for informing any of the game participants about what's playing out. At the bottom, there's 2 information feeds. One's kind of a news feed that you heard Arnel mention, and this integrated with Slack with a hyperlinks. So if you want to give a quick overview of something that plays out in the game, some incident that plays out that you want players to react to, you can throw it in this news item. And there's also a scenario background. You can control these with it's basically like a slide set, and include video from YouTube if you want to lay out the background. So that's kind of the main interface, or the establishing the common understanding of what's playing out in the game. I'll jump over to drafting an argument. So I'm viewing this as a white cell. So as the white cell, I can see what the United States is currently drafting by clicking up here, and it'll bring up, similar to what we talked about before, you've got your action and result, your 2 variables that I mentioned, as well as the factors favoring success that you can lay out. You can establish character counts if you want. And then what happens is the white cell can identify up to 3 different categories of arguments to be submitted as a package, or if you want to restrict this to just a single argument. I think just talking to Arnel, 3 might be a little bit much for each turn. Maybe 1 or 2, depending on how detailed you want to get in each argument, might be the right level. And then you can also propose changes to the colors on the map through drop-down menus, as well as the region impacts, which is the same thing, 1 level below the level of the state, as well as propose any changes to any of your icons that you have control over for the main map. And then once you make these, we'll bounce over to the reviewing argument process, which will identify, how many changes get approved and which ones don't. So things kind of progress over here to the right. This is the current situation. This is how you propose changes to what the current situation, and this is the approval area where the white cell will either approve or reject different aspects of the argument. So as things come in, they'll populate across the top. Only Russia right now, for this example, has submitted any argument. I can see different aspects of the argument as I click through. And one of these can be a secret argument if you'd like to include that, which basically hides all the text of the argument from the player. This was used kind of extensively in the white cell, or in the matrix game that Arnel ran. A lot of the players were proposing secret arguments just to hide, some of the behind the scenes actions that were taken. And as things are coming in, this is the point counterpoint comment area where the white cell, other teams can provide critiques, recommendations, or give your logic from the white cell in terms of the adjudication process of what aspect was approved and what wasn't, to include approve or disapprove the changes in the colors on the map, as well as any unit movements. So this was up the top. The top half here is kind of the dashboard view for anything that you might be doing synchronously. Again, this map has all the same capabilities that you saw in the front, but what I'll do is just give a quick demo of some of the capabilities for adjudication that you might use in a synchronous game. For example, you might want to create a survey where you identify, you'd like to ask some of your players a question, and once you display it to the players, you'll see it pop up. I'm logged in over here on the right side as a different player, and in the same game, not white cell, and I can respond to that, and then I can see, from the white cell perspective as those responses start to come in. So if you'd like to ask a question about, will this move succeed? What are the things that we need to worry about, and give a couple different categories, you can run those in-game surveys and then put in your notes and display those back to the teams. So this gives everybody the opportunity to see the responses as they come in, and you can use that as a method for adjudicating your arguments or dice rolls if you so choose. And the dice rolls will work just as you'd expect them to. You can choose a number of dice, thresholds, and then they'll have the opportunity to roll dice, and everybody can look at the outcome and see those things as they come in. So that's kind of the adjudication process. And then in the history area, sorry. Right now, so this is a 2-turn game, and you can see all of the arguments that came in for previously completed turns, and this gives you the ability to conduct those AARs. And as you view the previous turn, there's no arguments, but you can see the background scenario. But for each of the turns that are completed, you'll see all the comments and arguments that came in for each of the teams, as well as whatever the conditions of the map were at the time this turn got finished. You also see in the news items and any completed surveys. So this is what gives you the entire reference for what played out during the game, so that when you want to conduct those AARs, you can pull this up, and as well as use this as a reference as the game plays out to understand, what had transpired in previous turns as you start to get 6 or 7 turns in. The team area is just the opportunity for players to develop their strategies, send messages back and forth. So this is a message that came in with a little notification. And this gives you the ability to coordinate with allies, back channel communications between adversaries. And as the white cell, I can drop in and view any of the internal team discussions if I'd like to. And that's kind of the entire front end of the game. And I'll just drop over here to the back end really quick, just to give you an idea of what the capabilities are for designing the scenario. And then I'll open it up to see if there's any questions, and we'll just wrap it up. So in the back end, this is only an area that the white cell would have access to. And it'll allow you to do the initial setup, which is the first area here. This is where you'll identify all of your game options. Are you conducting a synchronous game? Send notifications, identify what your conditions are. Again, so for the conditions that I had on there was disinformation receptivity, internet access. So these are all the building blocks in terms of building the background scenario. What countries are going to be in play? What regions are going to be in play? As well as drafting up the scenario background. In the execution area, this is where I could draft any of my news items that I want to put up. This is basically like a draft or any content management system you might be familiar with, like WordPress, where you're basically posting a little news feed into the news feed with a little post, as well as manage turns, end the current turn, identify the time that you'd like any of the turns to end. If you want to allocate 30 minutes, you can do that, or a week, as they did during Maelstrom. You can add units as well as incidents in these screens, and it's pretty easy to do just by clicking the map. It'll automatically load the latitude and longitude with some of the information, and it's pretty easy to create any of the incidents that you want to identify up here along with that information that you entered in. So there's a set of initial markers that you can start with, as well as some blanks for anything that may not be readily available. If you guys have requirements for anything that you want to include, more markers can be created. Same thing for units. And finally, I just go over the data polls. There's, if you've got, if you'd like to go back and review some of the specific arguments that were submitted, and do it in a text document. This is just going to give you the ability to send the record of what was submitted by each of the turns, and this gives you the ability to search text, extract some of the information or lessons learned that you'd like to go back and review for what transpired in some of the previous turns. And finally, this is just the team execution. So I mentioned, I think that this works by email invite. This is where you create your teams, send your invites, and edit any of the team members. So once you send the invite, they're automatically assigned to a team. And I think that about wraps it up. So in terms of what's being done for the future, I think the only thing right now that I've got on the roadmap is to add in a card system and some overall game counters or trackers, with graphs and stuff that are controllable on the main map to track any of the overarching quantitative data that you may want to be arguing over the course of your game. So with that, I'll pause. I'll send it back to Lexi to see if there's any questions or if there's anything we'd like to dig into that I've just discussed.
Yeah, Sebastian, feel free to come up if that did not answer your question. But just for everyone's essay, Sebastian's question was on games or activities that are going to integrate into UK Fight Club in the future. I'm hearing WarPaths as a system. Explicitly, you're looking at incorporating cards, any sort of like additional information, including, how many arguments are listed, etc. Do you guys have any other games or activities on your horizon that you'd be willing to share with the group?
Yeah, like Fleet Marine Force. No, just kidding. That's sad. We definitely have some guys already playing that from Fight Club, and the Marine Corps. I mean, we got to admit we've been playing a lot of their games and getting involved with what they're doing, because I feel like there are a couple terrain features ahead of us on some of this stuff. For Fight Club, it's really wherever the group wants to go with some of the games. And the way this happens, like the Warrior Council will talk about different games. I know Hearts of Stone is one that was talked about, being able to test out for how you would act at the operational strategic level for a campaign. So we might test that out in the next bound of activity. But the way we operate, and that's kind of been a winning model for us, is we determine which game. So right now, I think Command Professional Edition is one of the next ones we're going to go to. And before we just throw it out there and give licenses to everybody, because this is cost Her Majesty's government money, we make sure that they can, one, install the game on their computer, because we're giving it to them on their personal computer. Most of these games, we just give it to our fighters. So they install the demo. But two, we want to make sure that they're participating in a campaign of learning, so that there's a higher success rate in them learning the game and then using it if we put them against a couple missions in this campaign of learning. And then once that's done, at the end of that campaign, just like you saw in the one chart, is we'll have an event where we bring them together and we'll have it out and just have some fun and play the game, whether it's a competition or just us attacking blue on red, or having a mix of teams going at it. So that's kind of what direction we're not sure specifically which games we're going to have on 3 September in London, a gathering. We're going to have that conversation about what other games are out there for us to integrate into the club to play around with for our members.
Awesome. I think that gets after another one of our questions about how to make WarPaths available. And what I'm hearing is if people think them or their institute, etc., would benefit from using WarPaths as a game system, they should probably contact you either via your website or additional, Twitter, etc. information here.
I'll make it to be clear. So like WarPaths Fight Club was a key part of the development of WarPaths, and that though is owned by by Tom Nagle and Strategy Connections. So he has the, if you want to test out WarPaths or have him show you more about it or open that up and play with, that's Tom. So Tom, put your contact information in the comment section probably for those.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll throw WarPaths in the it's at warpaths.io is the website, and you can drop me a comment there if you've got questions, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Real quick, Lexi, before you go on. So one thing after Tom's demo there made me think about the experience we had with him, and I think it's worth mentioning. I think Sebastian's doing a lot of this too at the Marine Corps and Georgetown and all over it sounds like he's all over the place, is that we're developing these unconventional partnerships across defense, government, academia. And so for us, Fight Club, a non-government thing and a club working with the government, the Army headquarters here in the UK, the British Army headquarters, and then Defense Science and Technology Laboratory, DSTL, and building these capabilities, these prototypes, us, creating these ideas for what the requirements might be, and then turning on them faster. Tom was really great at, Paul Ellis, who's, I think he's in the call, or he's on the webinar as well, and he could talk to this, is that the DevSecOps or the DevOps spiral development or agile development, whatever you want to call it, that was occurring while the game was going on. And so that happening, rather than your traditional model of like, here's the requirement and then compete it out and wait, maybe it'll take several months, years for that requirement to get answered in government. That's just taking too long. And right now there's a lot of commercial technology that's available to put in the hands of our soldiers and our warfighters. And we want to try to, accelerate that, in a responsible way. And so we're not just, just playing around and doing, so we're putting a lot of thinking behind, building up the business cases and then getting the funding to put against, the development of these tools to make us better at what we do. And I think it's a winning model. I think we should all be trying to get after that, or in whatever organization you're in, is, be interdisciplinary, break away from the stove, these stovepipes, and smash silos and start pulling people together and see what you can come up with. Because that right there, I think it's part of the Fight Club spirit, is like bringing all these different people together to try to create something new or to innovate. I think we've been doing that quite a bit.
Awesome. Just want to direct your attention real fast. I believe Paul Ellis answered the question about second and third order effects and how they were adjudicated. Was there any other effect besides limiting ability for subsequent maneuver?
I'm going to catch up there on what Paul is saying. Yeah, so thanks to Paul Ellis for helping out here in the chat. Say that one more time, Lexi. So what? Second order effects with maneuver?
Yeah, let me find the original question. It was, were you able to adjudicate and include primary, secondary, cascading, and emergent effects, both positively and negatively? And then, of course, Paul said, yes, they limited subsequent maneuver, especially with bolder actions that resulted in government or civilian population reactions. But just wanted to know from your standpoint as, the adjudicators or game directors, was there any other primary, secondary, emergent effects that you adjudicated?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'll drop his name drop here. Dr. Rob Johnson, who's a very eccentric scholar from Oxford, who was really kind and helped out our team in the adjudication cell and the white cell. I mean, we had a lot of clever people in that group. And so we would take all the inputs from all the different teams, and based on what they want to do, I mean, we could go, different degrees and dimensions of effects to include cyber, to include, things that we would respond with to their actions. And I think we're rather creative. Jake, I think he might be on here too. So Jake and Paul and the team that were pretty much facilitating the game, they're very creative with the way they would respond with, this team did this. And the other thing that was kind of cool was some teams would think, I'm going to do this action, and I already know they're going to do this is going to be the response, and they weren't always that wasn't always the case. And so this really modeled different human behavior from the teams for us to study, because everyone thought, well, I'll do this action and red is going to do this or blue's going to do that. And really, we watched them think that from us in the white cell and the observers, and they were normally wrong because they were normally like off. And that shows the degree of miscalculations that can happen if you don't get it right. Tom, did you want to highlight anything there? You were part of the white cell and participated a bunch in adjudication.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was, what the white cell wanted to allow in and play out. I was primarily involved in the technical side to make sure that everything was working right. But Paul was the workhorse and making sure that everything was tracked. And what I've tried to do with the platform is just make sure that those capabilities to track those kinds of second and third order effects, like the colors on the map, the documenting the things on the history, are just there as a reference, because a lot of times there'll be disagreements if you've been involved in a game about what happened multiple turns previous to that and what the implications were. They can be referenced easily within the game to go back and say, this is how it played out. This is what my understanding. And it's realistic when you've got people that disagree over the information that's generated by an action. I mean, that happens in the real world. Who's going to carry the narrative, I guess. And I think that plays out in matrix games in terms of who's able to articulate the best argument and use the information and tools at their disposal to the best. And I think that plays out in the matrix game as well.
Awesome. So question just came through from Don Smith about applying this platform and tool to a more information warfare context. Given that you said, hey, there was probably a little bit of disinformation, propaganda, I'm including Paul in this, you as well. Do you see that this platform and application could be adapted for additional information warfare?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of areas that I'm interested in taking this right now, and I'm building it. I saw the question about the card system. I was referring to, in a lot of war games, you've got a series of cards that are presented with quantitative impacts on different trackers that are used to keep track of where people are in the game in terms of progress towards their strategy. So that's one of the things that I'd like to add. I definitely like to explore the information aspects with different capabilities to represent misinformation, and I'm working on a couple different ideas for that. And another one is deterrence, where trying to bring in this idea where you've got an adversary to deter, but not just in the near term, but there's several terms of deterrence that you have to work with, near, medium, far term, and you've got different sets of costs and benefits associated with actions, and you have to do the net present value, I guess, of the cost and benefit of different aspects of deterring an adversary. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of different areas that I'm interested in taking it, and it's just a matter of who's going to be playing the game next as these games or these ideas get implemented.
And we've come to our fun question segment. There's going to be 3. I just want to set expectations, everyone. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to our great presenters using their website, contact information, etc. But I'm going to go ahead and ask our last 3 questions now. So first and foremost comes from Chris Daly, and I think this is at the forefront of all of our minds. Where do you guys stand, and how do you cooperate with other institutional wargaming shops, such as Castle, which I can never remember what it stands for, but the wargaming shop at National Defense University, et cetera, maybe some wargaming shops at staff colleges? And do you see an opportunity for increasing that crosstalk?
Yeah, so for Fight Club, absolutely, we want to do that. I mean, the one thing that we don't have an abundance of is time, right? So in a given, this past year, we've only been just together for just a bit over a year. I mean, this was started back in April of 2020. So, and then of course, right in the mix of the pandemic. So this year, a lot of the members, because of their day jobs, are pretty busy with what they have to do there. And just the events that we already have on the diary, as the Brits say, the calendar, it's pretty loaded up with stuff. And so we would like, of course, we'd like to collaborate. I mean, the Connections organizations, the Connections USA, Connections UK, which is coming up. We'll have some of our members, and some of them are straddle both, or in Connections and are in Fight Club. we'll help out there, and we'll go there and play some games. The 3rd of September, we have, like I said, it's a big deal for us because we'll go out to London, and one of our, I think it's probably our 2nd time actually, some of us even gathering together in person to talk to each other and play some games. And so in terms of reaching out to other organizations, like I watched your presentation from Ian Brown at the Krulak Center. They're doing some good stuff. Maybe we can combine with them. Of course, Goose and any of you. I mean, I think that's the beauty of this whole thing, is that we have this community practice and all these people that are, that have same passion and are all willing to learn together. And I think just bringing the groups together will spark some good stuff. So there's definitely an appetite to do that.
Awesome. So this is a question that me as a facilitator for Goose, I always appreciate asking, keeping in mind that we do have some students on the line or students who watch. And I think Tom, you said you went to SSP as well. What are some articles, frameworks, or even commercial games that you think you would recommend to current students?
Tom, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think Ellie Bartel's work is typically tends to be the best. She's at Rand. I'd highly recommend anybody that's interested in, wargaming outside of the typical, the typical war game power users of high-end conflicts. I think she's done a lot of interesting work in terms of more political war games and some of the perspectives. So a lot of times when I'm doing research, I come back to her articles a lot. So I highly recommend her. Yeah, I think I've got a couple of books that I've referenced, some of the recent stuff on Matrix Wargaming, and I'd have to pull them up, but I'd be happy to post them in the chat if it stays up. But yeah, I think that's what I would recommend. Of course, War on the Rocks, Modern War Institute over at West Point's got a lot of good articles on wargaming. So
I would say to your students, Lexi, and to the network here is, read more broadly, not just about wargaming, because I could say get Peter Perlo's book and Phil Saban's book, because I'm sure I think most people on here already probably read it or are already reading those books. But I would say read more broadly, outside just wargaming, looking at more broadly at just gaming. So the book I'd recommend, one I read a while ago, as I'm doing my PhD research for King's College, is Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal. It's a pretty good book. And she talks about some different, she talks about gamification, but these different concepts, like theories of gamification, I really think if we better understood them, and we can take games and apply them in ways that can help better our organizations, to make it fun, right, and engaging, so that it's. I think that there's a danger in the word war game, because I guess people, especially that wear uniform, tend to anchor on just wargaming courses of action, and really, gaming can be more powerful if we were to embrace it. And I'm learning this late in my career. So for you guys that are younger out there, just read more broadly across different disciplines. I threw up there, at the bottom of the slide there, Eleanor Ostrom. Take a look at what she's done with sustainability and development work. I think it's pretty incredible what she's accomplished in her career lifetime.
Yeah, if I could jump in with one of the other points, like I kind of referenced the power users of wargaming, and I think one of the challenges for the future, and I think Sebastian's doing a great job with this, is trying to push wargaming out to the non-power users, where you're starting to get, especially if you've got people in distance learning environments and things of that nature. I think that as you move forward, as you start to demonstrate the value and pull them in, there's going to be a lot of, especially with, tools that help facilitate some of the distance wargaming, and, they're starting to proliferate now, that, you'll see a lot of more creative approaches to wargaming and more ideas percolating up.
Awesome. And last question, it came through a while ago, but still important. Where do you get UK Fight Club swag?
That's a great question. Paul's got a lot of it. We have coins. I mean, we're little by little, we're gathering up our swag here as we go to events and get some stuff. One of the cooler ones we got, aside from the coin, is Paul Ellis got some coasters that I like to put my whiskey glasses on. So I think Paul's got some of those. I mean, the thing is, if you join Fight Club, we're pretty generous, and we care about our members, and so and it's free, right? So you can join for free and get yourself some swag at these events and stuff. And so we hope that hopefully this pitch will get more people involved.
Awesome.
We'll get you
Thank
some, Lexi. We'll make sure to send you and Sebastian some more swag.
I would say we would get you some goose swag, but I'm looking at Sebastian's little icon bubble here. I'm like, do we have swag? Can we order it? Have credit card? We'll shop. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for coming in, teaching us a little bit about more Matrix gaming and the UK Fight Club. And we look forward to hearing more from you and seeing what's coming up for the UK Fight Club in the next couple of months. For everyone who's on the line, please feel free to drop. I'm just going to end the recording.
Thanks so much, Lexi.
Thank you.